amendments and the time. This is not an open rule, and I would have them to know that if it were an open rule, then all members would be able to offer this amendment to the bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today we've had a distinguished group of speakers, including the gentleman, Mr. Hastings, who spent years of his service not only on behalf of the people of Florida, but on behalf of all of us as he served on the intelligence community, on the committee. We have had members walk in and out of here. The gentlewoman from North Carolina, Virginia Fox, who brings a thoughtful articulation about her ideas about the protection of this country, not just for the people of North Carolina, but for the people of the United States. We've had the gentleman, former sheriff, Mr. Nugent, a member of Congress from Florida, also come and talk about their ideas about how you protect this country by protecting the men and women who are engaged in the active and day-to-day business. Gentleman, Mr. Hastings referred to Al-Qaeda is not defeated. We still have a threat that is out there. The gentleman, Mr. Farenthold, talked most forthrightly and honestly about the need of the American people to have confidence and thanks for the intelligence community and that which they do. The gentleman, Mr. Ruppersberger, the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, as they bring their ideas forth in an open process that would be allowed in the committee, Intelligence Committee, and then to bring that forward as they would discuss that at the Rules Committee here on the floor of the House of Representatives. It's an interesting dialogue that we get into about our hopes and desires about supporting the intelligence community. But we must remember that the need for our intelligence community and for them to have clear direction from this Congress is important. The killing of the most wanted terrorist in the world, Osama bin Laden, is a perfect example of the necessary intelligence, information, and support from this Congress for funds and the authorizing process, the oversight that is provided by the Congress. The men and women in this intelligence community and the armed forces serve this nation and they provide us victories, day-to-day victories, not only in keeping America safe, but victories with finding and killing terrorists around the globe who would harm America and our allies. The underlying bill today allows for that continued service by these brave men and women for the benefit of the American people. 6 years ago was far too long for Congress to have skirted its responsibilities to aid and help the intelligence community with an authorization. Now is the time to ensure the appropriate accountability, responsibility, and funding is given to the intelligence community to carry out their mission to keep America safe and to look forward and, as might be said, over the horizon to ensure that whatever is next, they are prepared for. I would like to applaud the chairman, gentleman Mike Rogers from Michigan, and the ranking member, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Ruppersberger, and the intelligence community for this authorization bill as they work so well with the men and women of the intelligence community on a mission which is important for us to join in with the administration to ensure that our intents are very clear to them. We live in a dangerous time and in a dangerous world, and I feel much better protected knowing that this hard work is done by so many dedicated people. So I encourage a yes vote on the rule, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted, and without objection, a motion to consider. The gentleman's floor is recognized.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Speaker, I send to the desk a privileged concurrent resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the concurrent resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 50. Resolved that when the House adjourns on the legislative day of Friday, May 13, 2011, or Saturday, May 14, 2011, on a motion offered pursuant to this concurrent resolution by its majority leader or his designee, It stand adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday, May 23, 2011, or until the time of any reassembly pursuant to Section 2 of this concurrent resolution, whichever occurs first. Section 2A. The Speaker or his designee, after consultation with the minority leader, shall notify the members to reassemble at such place and time as he may designate if, in his opinion, the public interest shall warrant it. B. After reassembling pursuant to subsection A, when the House adjourns on a motion offered pursuant to this subsection by its majority leader or his designee, the House shall again stand adjourned pursuant to the first section of this concurrent resolution.
The question is on the concurrent resolution. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
The gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays have been requested. Those favoring a vote of the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to House Resolution 257 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 1231. Will the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Gardner, kindly take the chair?
So go ahead and start reading it. The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the further consideration of H.R. 1231, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to amend the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act to require that each 5-year offshore oil and gas leasing program offer leasing in the areas with the most prospective oil and gas resources, to establish a domestic oil and natural gas production goal, and for other purposes.
When the Committee of the Whole rose on Wednesday, May 11, 2011, proceedings on Amendment Number 4, printed in House Report 11274, offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating, had been disposed of. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in House Report 11274, on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment 5 by Mr. Tsongas of Massachusetts, Amendment Number 6 by Mr. Brown of Florida, Amendment Number 7 by Mr. Thompson of California, Amendment Number 8 by Mr. Inslee of Washington. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business in the request for recorded vote on Amendment Number 5, printed in House Report 11274 by the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Mrs. Tsongas, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 5, printed in House Report Number 112-74, offered by Ms. Tsongas of Massachusetts.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The House holding its first series of votes for the day as members are voting on amendments to a measure expanding offshore oil and gas exploration, legislation they debated yesterday. After this, possible votes on procedural motions. Members just finished with rule debate on intelligence programs for fiscal year 2011. We do expect further work on that with votes possible as the day progresses. Joining us now is Chris Strom of National Journal to talk about the intelligence programs legislation. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
What can you tell us about the programs that are being reauthorized in the intelligence bill that the House is considering today and tomorrow?
Well, this is the annual intelligence authorization bill. For years, this was a bill that never got through Congress, and last year was the first time since 2005 that an intelligence authorization bill actually went to the president for his signature and was signed into law. The bill authorizes programs and spending for all of the U.S. intelligence agencies, and the total amount that we know it was disclosed last year at $80.1 billion. And I'm told that this year there's a slight increase of about 1%. So basically, when there's all this pressure to cut budgets, the intelligence spending is being maintained and slightly increased.
Any details about the proposed $200 million in savings that Intelligence Chair Mike Rogers says is in the bill? Where's that coming from?
Well, there's been a controversy that has developed in the last several hours over this bill. The overall spending is actually being increased above what the level was for last year. But what happened is that the lawmakers moved money around, and the White House notified Congress late yesterday that it was objecting to some of the proposed changes that were being made. And that came as a surprise to members of Congress because they said that they've been meeting with people inside the intelligence agencies in order to make these changes, and they didn't hear any objections, and then at the last minute, these objections come along. Now, it's important to note that the White House never is not proposing to veto this legislation, so it's just objecting to some of the changes. And one of the changes is that so lawmakers are not authorizing an increase in hiring personnel for intelligence agencies to the level that the administration wants. The bill will still allow intelligence agencies to hire more personnel, but it just doesn't go to the level that the administration wants. And so there's about $200 million that has been shifted around and taken away from personnel hiring and put toward other uses. And this is all in the classified annex. And so we don't have full transparency and visibility into exactly where that money is being spent. But the White House says that it's objecting to that. Now, this is largely dealing with, we believe, CIA, the CIA part of the budget, which is about $53 billion. And so $200 million out of $53 billion is something that members of Congress and their aides are saying the White House is kind of making a fuss about something that's really kind of small in the overall picture.
Is there anything in the bill relating to operations in Pakistan and Afghanistan in the wake of the death of Osama bin Laden?
Well, overall, the bill, because it's approving spending for covert intelligence activities, definitely it's approving spending on activities related to Pakistan and Afghanistan. There's nothing that was specifically put into the legislation directly as a result of the operation to go after Osama bin Laden. Largely, this bill was put together before that operation, the operation to get bin Laden, became public. But one thing that Democrats did end up adding into the bill is an increase in the number of CIA counterterrorism analysts. There was a debate for reducing the number of CIA analysts that the administration had wanted, and when Democrats were originally objecting to the bill, they negotiated to bring back the number that the administration wants. And so the administration is getting all of the CIA counterterrorism analysts that it wanted, whereas before there was a push to reduce that number. And Democrats are now saying that one of the main reasons why this needs to happen is because these analysts were essential in finding and going after bin Laden.
Are there particularly notable amendments to look out for?
The amendments are not that significant. One of the most interesting amendments is that the Congress wants the administration to report back on efforts to go after Anwar al-Awlaki. He is the radical U.S.-born cleric living in Yemen and who is part of the group known as Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, recently. It was linked to the attempt to blow up an airliner approaching Detroit on Christmas Day in 2009, and also the attempt last year to mail cargo bombs out of Yemen to the United States. And so lawmakers want a report on basically al-Awlaki's, in what the intelligence community knows about al-Awlaki. Again, this will be a classified report, and so it's something that will happen between the administration and the intelligence agencies.
We have just a couple of seconds left. Is the Senate putting together their own bill, and if so, how does that differ from what's coming out of the House?
Yes, the Senate has its own bill that largely is in line with what the House bill is, except there is a provision in the Senate bill that is controversial, that at least has drawn opposition from Senator Ron Wyden has opposed it, and it would essentially allow the administration to take action against intelligence officials that leak classified information. But Wyden is concerned that this would allow the administration to punish legitimate whistleblowers, and he feels that the language is too broad and that needs to be resolved. Other than that, it's possible that the Senate will take up the House version of this bill, which does not have that provision dealing with whistleblowers.
Chris Strome of National Journal, we do appreciate your time today.
Thanks.
And once again, the House is in its first series of votes for the day, members voting on amendments to a measure expanding offshore oil and gas exploration. This is legislation they debated yesterday. More work on intelligence programs coming up. This is live coverage of the U.S. House on C-SPAN. While members are voting, remarks from House Speaker John Boehner earlier today. He spoke with Capitol Hill reporters about the Republican plan to change entitlement programs like Medicare in order to address federal spending deficits. He also talked about Republican plans to reduce gas prices and increase jobs.
Morning, everyone. A big focus of the speech that I gave on Monday was about the need to focus on policies that would create real economic growth and robust private sector job creation. That includes fundamental tax reforms, real spending cuts, stopping harmful regulations, more job-creating American energy production, and passing the 3 pending trade agreements to open new markets for American products. Last week we saw some positive gains on the job front, which is always welcome news. But we also saw an increase in the unemployment rate. And the American people continue to ask the question, where are the jobs? And job growth in America is still nowhere near what it should be. Unfortunately, rather than joining with Republicans in focusing on policies that promote long-term economic growth, the Democrats who control Washington want to increase spending and they want to increase taxes. Listen, that's a recipe for more economic uncertainty for private sector job creators and among families and small business who are struggling to make ends meet. Earlier this week, I again made clear there'd be no debt increase without meaningful spending cuts and budget reforms. As I said on Monday, the spending cuts should be greater than the accompanying increase in the debt limit. Clearly, we struck a nerve, and the response from the White House and from Democrats and the left has been panic and hysteria. Now listen, for years, Washington's gotten away with kicking the can down the road and dealing with higher deficits without ever facing the realities of government's spending addiction. And while this may be hard for the Washington crowd to accept, those days are over. We're determined to cut spending and change the way Washington spends the American taxpayers' dollar. And the American people have overwhelmingly rejected the idea of giving the president a blank check to increase the debt limit, and Republicans are listening to the American people. I think what we and the American people are asking for isn't at all radical. We want to stop the tax hikes that we believe will destroy jobs in our country. Democrats want to raise taxes. We want to stop Washington from spending money that we don't have. Democrats want a free pass to continue to spend more. We're in a hole, and we've got to stop digging. Yet the Democrats won't give up the shovel. I also want to address those who suggest that our efforts to cut spending could somehow hurt our economy or hurt the markets. I believe if we don't act boldly, and act boldly now, the markets will act for us very soon. Remember, the Standard & Poor's warned several weeks ago that it may downgrade United States debt, and not over the debt limit fight, but because Washington has no plan to deal with our massive debt. And the greatest threat to our economy, to job creation, and to our children's future is doing nothing. Doing nothing is not an option. The American people won't tolerate it, and neither will we. And lastly, this week, Republicans took action to address skyrocketing gas prices by passing 2 bills that increase American energy production and create more American jobs. These bills are part of our American Energy Initiative, and you'll see more bills on the floor in the coming weeks and months. On the other side of the Capitol, Senate Democrats debated a tax hike backed by the White House that some in their own party would admit won't lower gas prices 1 penny. Now listen, the American people are demanding that Congress take concrete steps to increase the supply of American energy, to lower costs, to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, and to create jobs. Republicans are listening and taking action to provide much-needed relief to families and small businesses who are struggling with high prices at the pump. Well, I do think that there are going to have to be budget process reforms. I don't want to tie myself down in terms of what those are, but I don't want phony caps. I don't want phony targets. We know what the challenges are. Why don't we go tackle the problems? All the gimmicks that have been used in the past have never worked. Congress has found a way to wiggle out of all of them. The only way to do this is the right way, and that's to go in to make real program changes that will put these entitlement programs on a much stronger foundation where they can be preserved for the tens of millions of Americans who count on them. Well, Pakistan is an important ally of the United States, and I believe that, that we should further our engagement with those in Pakistan because they are an important ally, and frankly, the terrorist threat that we face, they face as well. And let's not forget that the Pakistanis have lost more people in the fight with the terrorists than we have. Having said that, I've got questions about our relationship. And I think it's time to look the Pakistanis in the eye and get a commitment that they are fully on board with us. Because it's clear that, to me, that, you know, they've got 1 foot in our camp and they've got 1 foot in some other camp. And if we're going to continue to provide aid and strengthen this relationship, I think we need to have a clearer understanding. Listen, we all know that going after oil companies is easy politics. But we also know if this bill were to pass, it wouldn't lower gas prices 1 penny. And I believe that as we get in to looking at the fundamental reform of the corporate tax code, this and every other issue ought to be considered. Listen, having been involved in a lot of efforts here in Congress regarding military action overseas during my years in Congress, whether it was the first Gulf War, whether it was Serbia and Kosovo, or clearly what the length of time we've been in Iraq and Afghanistan, people grew weary, whether it's the American people or, frankly, members of Congress. We have a lot invested in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And this is a time that we really ought to make sure that we take no action that would undermine all the progress that we've made. And I do think that in Iraq there's going to be gaps in their ability to secure their country at the end of the year. I think we ought to continue to work with the Iraqis to find out what those gaps are and to be able to work with them if they would request our help in filling those gaps. And even though we've eliminated Osama bin Laden, let's not forget that there's an al-Qaeda terrorist network out there with affiliates around the world who are still intent on killing Americans. And I think the work that we're engaged in Afghanistan is critically important for the long-term security of the United States, our citizens here and abroad. This is no time to back away from our engagement. Eric. Well, I think that looking at tax expenditures in the confines of an effort to reduce the corporate tax code are certainly appropriate. And I think that's the appropriate place to look at this. When it comes to savings in this effort to increase the debt limit, I think it's a little too early to lock. I'm not going to lock myself into what kind of time frame. But I clearly believe it's time to bend the cost curve and to get America headed toward a solid fiscal foundation, which we do not see today. And so over the next coming weeks, I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities to talk about it. We have the second highest corporate tax rate in the world, and it makes America less competitive than we could be. And at a time when people are asking where are the jobs, we got a number of U.S. manufacturers who've made it clear they're not going to build new plants in the United States because of the tax code and because of the regulatory burden that they face here at home. If we want to put Americans back to work, I think lowering the corporate tax rate is critically important. And to do that, I think that we have to look at the tax expenditure side, the deductions, credits, and other gimmicks that may be in the tax code that have accumulated over the last 30 years as a way of finding which of those are appropriate, which aren't, and using those savings in order to lower the corporate tax rate. We're not interested in raising taxes on the American people. And when you start talking about corporate tax rates, understand this. Companies don't pay taxes. Their customers pay taxes for them. Because the people who buy their goods and services are the ones who eventually see those increased taxes in the price of the goods and services they get. I think that we need to look at this in the context of lowering the corporate tax rate. Let me just say this. I think this is the moment, and this is the opportunity for America to get its fiscal house in order. I believe that raising taxes on the very people that we expect to reinvest in our economy and to hire people is the wrong idea. For those people to give that money to the government, that means it won't get reinvested in our economy at a time when we're trying to create jobs. And secondly, if we're going to put America's fiscal house in order, it's time to make real changes to preserve these entitlement programs that are very important. But having said that, we know they're unaffordable. And if we don't do anything, seniors are going to see cuts. And no one wants to see cuts in these programs. We've got to make real changes to put them on a sound fiscal foundation. And that's my goal as we get into this negotiation. Alan, last one. I think America has a strong safety net for those who live near the bottom of our economy. And I think that we should. I'm a big believer that in a country like ours, those who have the opportunity to succeed and do succeed have a responsibility to help those who can't compete. I've always believed this. And like any
on this vote, the yeas are 195, the nays are 223. The amendment is lost. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 6, printed in House Report 11274 by the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Brown, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in House Report number 112-74, offered by Ms. Brown of Florida.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This is the second of 4 House votes on amendments to offshore oil and gas exploration legislation. They've moved on to 2-minute voting now. As members continue working on intelligence programs for fiscal year 2011, a related story from the Associated Press. The top Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee is insisting that enhanced interrogation techniques were not a factor in the discovery of Osama bin Laden's whereabouts. John McCain, who opposes the use of torture tactics by the U.S. military, said on the Senate floor earlier today that those tactics aren't necessary for U.S. success in the war on terror. You can see live coverage of the Senate, as you know, on our companion network, C-SPAN 2.
On this vote, the yeas are 134, the nays are 279. The amendment is lost. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 7, printed in House Report 11274 by the gentleman from California, Mr. Thompson, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in House Report number 112-74, offered by Mr. Thompson of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Again, 2-minute voting underway. This is the third of 4 House votes on amendments to offshore oil and gas exploration legislation. A vote on final passage is expected later this afternoon. The AP is reporting this afternoon that President Obama is asking Congress to let FBI Director Robert Mueller stay in his job an extra 2 years beyond the mandated term limit. The president, in a statement, asked lawmakers to go along with his idea for the sake of our nation's safety and security, quote unquote. The administration had been looking for a replacement for Mr. Mueller, whose term is set to expire in September.
On this vote, the yeas are 156, the nays are 263. The amendment is lost. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 8, printed in House Report 11274 by the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Inslee, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in House Report number 112-74, offered by Mr. Inslee of Washington.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
As voting continues on the House floor on oil drilling legislation, from a hearing we aired earlier today on C-SPAN 3, and this is an article from the Hill newspaper, Senate Democrats clashed with top executives of the country's 5 largest oil companies today amid efforts to eliminate billions of dollars in tax breaks for the industry. The executives from ExxonMobil, Shell Oil, Chevron, BP, and ConocoPhillips roundly blasted efforts to repeal the tax breaks, arguing it's unfair to target the oil industry when other companies enjoy similar deductions. By undermining U.S. competitiveness, they would discourage future investment in energy projects in the United States and therefore undercut job creation and economic growth. Senate Democrats are pushing legislation to cut $21 billion in tax breaks for the 5 largest oil companies over 10 years. By the way, that hearing is airing again right now on our companion network, C-SPAN 3.
Yeas are 100.
Ms. Linda Sanchez of California. Ms. Linda Sanchez of California votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 160, the nays are 256. The amendment is not adopted. Under the rule, the committee rises.
Start reading the time. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union had under consideration H.R. 1234 and pursuant to House Resolution 257, I report the bill as amended by that resolution back to the House with sundry further amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration the bill H.R. 1231 and pursuant to House Resolution 257 reports the bill as amended by that resolution back to the House with sundry further amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered. Is a separate vote demanded on any further amendment reported from the Committee of the Whole? If not, the Chair will put them in gross. The question is on the adoption of the amendments. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The question is on the engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to amend the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act to require that each 5-year offshore oil and gas leasing program offer leasing in the areas with the most prospective oil and gas resources, to establish a domestic oil and natural gas production goal, and for other purposes.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. House will be in order. Members, please take their conversations off the floor. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
I am opposed.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Holt of New Jersey moves to recommit the bill, H.R. 1231, to the Committee on Natural Resources with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendments. Page 4, line 19, strike the final closing quotation marks and following period, and after line 19 insert the following. 7, no foreign sales. In each oil and gas leasing program under this section, the Secretary shall specify that all oil and natural gas produced under leases issued under the program shall be offered for sale only in the United States. Page 6, after line 3, insert the following and redesignate accordingly.
Is there objection? Objection. The clerk will read.
3, reducing number of in developing a 5-year oil and gas leasing program, the Secretary shall seek to reduce the number of non-producing offshore oil and gas leases by 50% by 2017.
May we have order, Mr. Speaker?
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, time and again over the past week, I've referred to the majority's trio of offshore drilling bills as amnesia acts. They willfully forget the lessons derived at great cost in lives and livelihoods from the Deepwater Horizon spill last summer.
Suspend. The House will be in order. Members are reminded to take their conversations off the floor. The House will be in order. Gentleman may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with these amnesia acts, the majority offers false promises to Americans who are struggling to make ends meet as gas prices continue to rise. The truth is that giving away more of the American people's offshore resources to big oil companies will do absolutely nothing to ease the prices at the pump. How do we know? Because the oil giants already are sitting on 11.6 billion barrels of oil in the Gulf of Mexico without lifting a finger to extract it. If my colleagues really believe that more domestic drilling is the answer to high gas prices, then they should support this final amendment, which does two things. First, to encourage the oil companies to drill on the tens of millions of acres of public land they already hold so that Americans can benefit from domestic oil production before the oil companies rush to lock up more land. And second, the amendment would help to keep the oil produced within the United States of America here at home. Mr. Speaker, the facts speak for themselves. Opening vast portions of the east and west coasts to drilling makes no sense when 79% of all the potential oil resources on the whole continental shelf already are available in the current offshore leasing program. Why risk every inch of American coastline, which supports millions of jobs in tourism and fishing and over $225 billion in related economic activity, when the Energy Information Administration tells us that unrestrained offshore drilling might lower gas prices not at all in the foreseeable future and maybe pennies 2 decades from now? Oil companies are active on just 10 million of the 34 million acres under lease in the Gulf. My Republican colleagues say, yes, but it takes time and money to explore before you can start production. Well, the fact is that of the 24 million leased acres lying fallow in the Gulf, they hold 70% of the region's technically recoverable oil. But the companies aren't exploring on a single one of those acres. They haven't even submitted exploration plans in those areas. Why should they, when they can squat on these resources and still
make $32 billion in profits just in the last 3 months. Mr. Speaker, every kindergartner knows you should clean your plate before you get a second helping. Evidently, the oil company executives never learned that lesson. Here is our chance to deliver the lesson to them. And if my colleagues truly believe that we need more drilling, not just more giveaways to big oil, then let's at least make sure the oil companies use the resources they have already leased instead of stockpiling them. And let's make sure that Americans get to use the oil produced on their land. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield now to the ranking member of the Resources Committee, Mr. Markey.
I thank the gentleman. Oil companies already have the drilling rights to public lands the size of Minnesota, on which they are not producing oil. Minnesota is the land of 10,000 lakes, and the area oil companies already have could be the land of 10,000 wells, but they are not drilling on it. And are Republicans saying they should drill on what they have? No. They want to put drill rigs off our beaches in New England, the Outer Banks, and California, all before we have implemented a single safety reform recommended by the independent Blue Ribbon BP Spill Commission. Today, 5 of the largest oil companies testified in defense of their billions of special tax breaks. ConocoPhillips said today it would be un-American to take away big oil's tax breaks. Well, it's not un-American. It's unbelievable that big oil has the arrogance to continue to defend its tax breaks as consumers are being tipped upside down at the pump. And how are these tax breaks for big oil paid for? I'll tell you how. The Republicans are planning to put an oil drill rig on top of the Medicare program. Republicans are building an oil pipeline into the pocketbooks of our seniors for tax breaks for the oil companies. The Republican agenda is to cut checkups for grandma and cut checks for big oil. They want to cut health care for grandma and give wealth care to the big oil executives. The Republican plan is tax breaks for big oil and tough breaks for our nation's seniors.
The gentleman's time has expired.
On the recommittal motion.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
I continue to reserve my point of order while rising in opposition to the motion.
No point of order?
Yes, sir.
You reserve time? The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you. This Democrat motion is just one more example of congressional Democrats attempting to obstruct a bill that will increase access to American energy resources. This motion is already the law. The law says the President has an authority to restrict foreign sales, and use it or lose it is already the law of the land. If my friends want to reduce the non-producing leases, then we need to get this administration to issue permits in a timely manner. This motion is trying to deflect criticism from the policies that have been perpetrated that block American energy production, cost jobs, and raise prices. It is simply a distraction from the real work that needs to be done to increase the supply of American energy. The bill we're voting on today represents a real choice, Mr. Speaker, on the future of American energy. A choice between using American energy resources or remaining dependent on the OPEC cartel. A choice between creating jobs in America or creating jobs offshore of Brazil. With this motion, the party opposite is standing for a drill there and not here policy. Mr. Speaker, that is not a strategy that will work to create American jobs. The underlying bill will create these jobs. Finally, this is a choice between strengthening our energy security in the face of $4 a gallon gasoline or being held hostage to the whims of volatile foreign regimes. Mr. Speaker, there can be no national security without energy security. As a small businessman, I know what the pressure of $5 a gallon diesel fuel did to my business back in 2008. And we only had 2 trucks on the road. Now think about what this is going to do to every household, every trucking business, every shipper, and every farmer in our country. The nation's families are hurting, Mr. Speaker. They're trying to decide between putting fuel in their cars to go to work, for putting food on the table, to get us moving in the right direction. This is a common sense, free market solution that can help us restore America's greatness. Congress took a bipartisan action in 2008 to lift the moratorium on offshore drilling and exploration. Yet this administration has unilaterally defied the will of this Congress and the will of the American people by effectively reinstating a moratorium. The energy resources don't belong to President Obama. They belong to the American people. And they should be used to create American jobs, generate revenue, reduce gasoline prices, and strengthen our national security. I urge my colleagues to vote against this motion. Let's pass this bill to return these American energy resources back to where they belong, and that is to the American people. May God continue to bless America.
The gentleman yields back. Without objection, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion to recommit. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The noes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I ask a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, the 15-minute vote on the motion to recommit will be followed by 5-minute votes on passage if ordered, adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 50 by the yeas and nays, and adoption of House Resolution 264 by the yeas and nays. 15-minute vote.
So votes now on a motion to recommit, a procedural motion. It's the last opportunity to change the bill on the floor. This is a 15-minute vote on expanding offshore oil and gas drilling. A vote on final passage would follow this vote. We anticipate the House will move on to intelligence programs and policy for fiscal year 2011 today. The rule for debate was approved earlier today. An hour of general debate along with amendment debate to follow. Votes on final passage expected to be taken tomorrow. Once again, the Senate Finance Committee earlier today got to hear from the heads of 5 of the world's largest oil companies on the large profits oil companies have been reaping in recent years. Senate Democrats want to stop those subsidies to those oil companies to be used to create jobs. That hearing is airing right now on our companion network, C-SPAN 3. While members are voting in the House here, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi earlier held a briefing. She spoke with Capitol Hill reporters about a variety of issues, including the impact that the House Republican budget would have on Medicare and federal subsidies to oil companies. This is about 15 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. As members are heading home for another congressional break, what's it, 2 weeks in, 1 week out, we will be hearing from our constituents about the Republican initiative to abolish Medicare as we know it. But some Republicans are trying to run away from their vote, and here it is. 100% of the yes votes to abolish Medicare were cast by the Republicans. Every Democrat voted no. 4 Republicans voted no. This is a vote tabulation that you will see over and over again. You will see it in its present form, and you will see it individually, because this is a vote to undermine one of the pillars of security for America's seniors. It would end Medicare as we know it, force seniors to pay at least $6,000 more a year. That's a lot of money, for fewer benefits. And there's a report from one of the committees to us that if you're in your 50s, you have to start saving now $1,000 a week. And it'll cost you about, a 54-year-old today would have to save an additional $182,000 so that they could have benefits when they're 65 years old that are commensurate to what they have now. $182,000. How many 54-year-olds do you know who can save $1,000 a month, not to invest in a business, to be entrepreneurial, to invest in their children's education, but to provide for their health security once they become 65 years old? So again, the helpful reminder, 235 Republicans voted to end Medicare, 180 9 Democrats unanimously voted no. Americans are rejecting this idea across the country. And here we have a situation where, it takes us back to energy, where we were yesterday. We have a situation where they want to end Medicare as we know it, have seniors pay $6,000 more for fewer benefits while they give tax breaks to big oil. They want to say to seniors who are on Medicaid and in nursing homes, forget about that, that's over for you. And that benefit for seniors as they block grant it and make it smaller while they give tax breaks to corporations sending jobs overseas. And then for the next generation, cuts in education and making college less affordable for nearly 10 million young people in our country while they give tax breaks to America's wealthiest families. That's in their budget. As you know, this week we unveiled our Make It in America Clean Energy Jobs Now package. It was a continuation of work that we had done the week before, the Bishop resolution, which would end the subsidies. Yesterday we talked about increasing energy production here at home. Drilling is allowed and even permitted in many places in our country that are being underutilized. Yes, we need to drill more for production here. There is, again, opportunity to do that the oil companies have ignored. And we are establishing benchmarks for oil development on federal property, imposing fees on oil and gas companies who sit on drilling leases and don't use them. Use it or lose it. And then not only are we complaining about their subsidies, not only are we complaining about price gouging and speculation at increasing the price at the pump, but we have a positive initiative to encourage new alternatives and renewables in transportation, building the infrastructure for alternative fuel vehicles. You know, it's one thing to be able to drive on natural gas, but you have to have distribution. You have to have the infrastructure to get it, and developing and manufacturing advanced vehicle technologies. That's what we talked about yesterday. So while we're giving tax breaks to big oil for a policy which just continues our dependence on foreign oil or fossil fuels in our own country without investing into the future, while we're doing all of that, we're also saying to seniors, we would prefer to give tax subsidies to big oil and have you pay the price. Just think of this. Just think of this. I think it's kind of remarkable. Tell me what you think. If we remove the tax breaks for big oil, the big 5 oil companies, we would save $32 billion over 10 years. Over 10 years. That's approximately what the big 5 made in the first quarter of this year. At that rate, they'll make over $1 trillion over 10 years. And they're telling us they need this $32 billion in order to have an incentive to drill to make $1 trillion in profit. In profit. I wanted to also share with you my Mother's Day trip to the Middle East. As always on Mother's Day, I like to visit our troops and say thank you to them, to all of our troops, especially to some of our moms and, would you believe it, grandmothers who are serving, young grandmothers who are serving. I said one example, Crystal, she has a 7-month-old baby and a 3-year-old child. That's what you hear over and over, these young moms who are serving. Some of them, their husbands are deployed as well. So they make a big sacrifice for our country. We want to know that them to know they are remembered on Mother's Day. And got some good reports from some of our troops as to how they were calling home on Mother's Day, those who were not moms themselves. We went to Qatar to go to Al Udeid, our forward Central Command base there, which is our platform for Iraq and Afghanistan, on our way to Iraq. We met with the troops there, and in Qatar we had a briefing from our diplomats there, of course, and the military, and met with the heir apparent on his views of what's happening in the region. In Iraq, we met with Prime Minister al-Maliki, talked to him about how we honor our responsibilities as both countries, as we prepare for the drawdown at the end of this year. Meeting with, very proud of our ambassador, Jeffrey. We met with the members of the Iraqi parliament. Congresswoman Escher was on the trip, and Her mother made her first Holy Communion in a church in Baghdad. So she had very serious concerns about the treatment of Christians and what was happening in churches in Iraq. And so we met with the Iraqi Christian community. And that, again, building on our initiatives to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, which for us is a national security issue, investing in innovation, which is a jobs issue when it comes to renewables and alternatives, protecting our beautiful environment, which is a health issue, as well as a moral issue to pass this planet on to future generations. But national security and jobs, very important in the energy debate. I'm very proud of Jerry Conley and the initiative he brought to the floor yesterday, and also of David Cicilline, who will bring an initiative to the floor today, and Tim Bishop, who led the way last week for us. Medicare, that's our fight. We vow to protect it. It's an initiative that is a pillar of security for our seniors. With that, I'd be pleased to take any questions you may have. No questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all. And, okay, now, when I was halfway down the hall. Yes, sir. Well, we have passed the Disclose Act, which I fully 100% support. I do not agree with the Supreme Court decision that people can make endless and undisclosed contributions to political campaigns. I think it undermines our democracy. I support the Disclose Act, which had that said that you have to disclose contributions. That was for everybody. The president's discretion only is narrow to those who have contracts with the government, is my understanding. Everybody has to disclose their political contributions. In other words, if a contractor were to contribute to you and you were a member of Congress, that would have to be disclosed. What we're aiming at in this is to have those who have this endless, undisclosed money going into campaigns, again, in a way that I believe undermines our democracy. I salute the President for what he did. Yes, ma'am. We have something called the deficit, and they are a drain. $32 billion in order for them to make $1 trillion over a 10-year period. I was very pleased, and perhaps you haven't seen the CRS report in response to Leader Harry Reid's request to CRS, because they were also charging that if they didn't have these subsidies to drill, it would have an impact on jobs and price at the pump and all the rest. I commend it to you for your reading because it debunks what they are saying. How do you say to the American taxpayer, how do you say to the American consumer who's paying the price at the pump, that in order for these people to make this much money, charge this much at the pump, you, the taxpayer, are subsidizing their production? It's just appalling. And I think that it will be interesting. I think it's great that they're here because it's a difference of opinion. This is the democratic society that we live in, that we have different points of view, and today they are presenting theirs. But they, who should have been in the lead for decades in renewables and alternatives, while we continue to increase our domestic production of oil. Nobody is saying we shouldn't do that, but we should do it in a way that is environmentally sound and, again, creates jobs and keeps our economy going. But for them to say at a time, any time I think it's wrong, but at a time of severe deficit challenge, which has an impact on the markets, as they keep telling us, we've got to do something about the fiscal soundness of the United States, that a company that makes $1 trillion, 5 companies that make, corporations that make $1 trillion over 10 years, needs $32 billion to incentivize them to make that big profit. I think it's just appalling. and so do the American people. And when they're doing it at a time when we're saying we've got to, as you saw Mr. Markey's chart yesterday, if you weren't here and didn't see it on TV, he had it here last week too. He may have it here next week we get back. It's a rig, an oil rig, drilling down into somebody's grandma's Medicare card. Why should seniors have to pay more for less while we're subsidizing big oil so they can make $1 trillion over the next 10 years? Yes, ma'am. Oh, can't wait to hear. How about you? Yeah. Well, I don't know that anybody's thinking of it in that context. It is a great thing for the security of our country. Not catching Osama bin Laden I was very careful of what I said when President Bush was president, not to criticize him for not catching Osama bin Laden by saying it isn't the be-all, end-all. But catching him is the be-all, end-all, if you know what I mean. If you don't, okay. But if you connect the dots and you bring it home, that's a very big deal. It's a big deal when we were in Qatar, when we were in Iraq, when we were in Israel. Oh, did I tell you? We also on the trip went to Israel, met with President Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Perez, the opposition leader Livni, representatives of many different aspects of Israeli life. We were there for the 63rd anniversary of the founding of the nation of Israel. It was a great celebration. But again, in Israel, the capture and death of Osama bin Laden was a very big deal. I'm not thinking of it in political terms, but in the terms of our national security, in terms of the boost of morale, in terms of the excellence of execution, the discipline, the allocation of resources, the focus, the patience, the connecting of the dots. Hail to the chief. I just haven't thought of it that way. I mean, the election's a long time off, and no, I think about Medicare a little bit that way. I think about Medicare a little bit that way, not because I would prefer that our colleagues would all agree with us on Medicare. Let's see how we can work together to extend its life. But if they don't, it's important for the American people to know that. And the election, again, is a long way off, but we do have one coming up soon in New York, and it seems to have an effect there. On the issue that you asked, I called President Bush after the news, a couple days after the death of Osama bin Laden, and thanked him for his role in that apprehension, that he strived to do that while he was President of the United States. In fact, I think he worked very hard to make that happen. I called President Clinton and thanked him for making Osama bin Laden public enemy #1 in the 90s, even before 9/11. There was a recognition that he was a threat, and there were resources committed to it. But as I say, President Obama connected the dots.
On this vote, the ayes are 180 and the nays are 243. The motion is not adopted. The question is on the passage of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman?
What purpose is the gentleman from Massachusetts?